Hello and welcome to Cycling Weekly's 2021 Tour de France preview in association with Zwift. Joining me today, web writer Johnny Long, who will be heading out to cover the race this year, and cycling writer, author and multiple time child champion Dr. Michael Hutchinson. A big thank you to Zwift for supporting all our Tour de France content this year. So let's get straight into it and take a look through this year's route and the key stats for the race. We have 21 stages covering a total distance of 3,383 kilometres. There are 2 rest days, 2 time trial stages covering 58 kilometres, 6 mountain stages of which 3 are summit finishes, 8 flat stages and 6 stages classified as hilly. The riders will tackle 13 first category climbs and 5 ore category climbs. There are time bonuses on the finish line of 10, 6 and 4 seconds for the first 3 riders across the line each day. There are also 6 stages with bonus seconds on offer of 8, 5 and 2 seconds. These are typically awarded on the last climb before a descent to the finish. Let's take a look at some of the prize money on offer. The winner of the yellow jersey in Paris will be awarded €500,000, second place €200,000 and the third place finisher €100,000. A stage winner nets themselves €11,000, while winners of the green and polka dot jerseys will receive €25,000. There's prize money on offer for anyone leading a classification jersey on a day, intermediate sprints and the first rider over an ore category climb. The Honorary de Grange prize is given to the first rider over the highest peak of this year's race. This year that's the Porte d'Envalira in the Pyrenees. The 2021 Tour de France starts in Brittany after the Copenhagen start was delayed due to the Danish city hosting matches as part of the European Football Championships. The first 2 stages both end with slight uphill finishes, both of which look testing enough to be out of reach of the sprinters and also force the GC riders into making sure they're near the front so as not to lose precious seconds as a result of gaps opening up. Stage 1 from Brest to Landanu finishes with a 3k climb of Côte de la Fosse au Loup, while Stage 2 finishes at the top of the Mur de Bretagne, the second of 2 ascents of that climb. The sprinters will have to wait until stages 3 and 4 before they can come out and get their fast twitch fibres working. The first time trial is on stage 5, but at just 27.2 kilometres over flat terrain, it's not going to shake things up too much. We have one more sprint stage before the riders tackle the longest stage in 21 years, 249.1 kilometres and with a testing run into the line at Le Creusot. And then we're into the Alps for 2 stages before the race's first rest day in Tignes. The race continues south and it's rendezvous with a double ascent of the Giant of Provence, Mont Ventoux on stage 11, something race director Christian Prudhomme has been keen to do for years. 3 transitional stages take us to the climax of the race with 3 stages in the Pyrenees, where the yellow jersey will likely be decided. The final flat time trial comes on the race's penultimate day before the transfer up to Paris and the traditional finale on the Champs-Élysées. So let's start with the Grand Depart, and that's an interesting looking first couple of stages there. Have we got course director Thierry Gouvenou hoping to put a particular Frenchman in yellow?
It does kind of look like it, doesn't it? That's kind of designed for Julian ALAPHILIPPE, I'd have thought.
It just means all the riders, anyone who fancies a stage win, and the GC riders have to be alert those 2 stages because gaps can open up as they did on Mur de Bretagne in 2011,
yeah,
2012.
It puts pressure on from the beginning. I like a Grand Depart that starts like this because you get a bit of pressure on from the beginning, but it's about this issue of who's getting into yellow early. It used to be you got a time trialist who gets yellow in the prologue and then the sprinter spend the first few days trying to get one of them into yellow on the time bonuses. And this feels so much more open and it's just going to make the race breathe a little right at the beginning because somebody's going to have yellow who's kind of maybe not an overall contender, but certainly someone about hanging on to it for a few days. So it just kind of puts a bit of life into it.
You wonder who, without the sprinters getting involved until the 3rd stage, you wonder which teams might want to take control of those first 2 days. It could be a complete free-for-all or someone might want to stamp their authority straight on the race.
It's got to be DECEUNINCK-QUICK with ALAPHILIPPE. I mean, if he doesn't win one of those first 2 stages or find himself in yellow, there'll be a mutiny amongst all the French. And when you're going up against like Van der Poel and those sorts of riders, there's no other Frenchman really on the start list who'll be able to match them and deliver that success early for France.
So it's stage 3 and the sprinters get their turn and you've got Sam Bennett, Caleb Ewan and Arnaud Demar. Probably the 3 favourites there for the sprint stages.
I feel looking at this year, I think it's about Sam Bennett. I think he's been so good. And he looked dominant. And I just don't see any of the other sprinters who just quite have that kind of swagger almost at the minute.
I mean, his team always produce winners. DECEUNINCK even if Sam Bennett wasn't winning, someone else would. They just know how to win.
Really what they go there to do is win sprint stages, punchy stages. They're not interested in winning Mountains jersey, they're not interested in the team classification, they're not interested in the overall. They've got a very specific mission.
And apart from those three main sprinters, Johnny, who do you think might throw a surprise or two into the bunch sprints this year?
You got Wout van Aert, who obviously was just winning for fun, like Jumbo would call it, from 20 kilometres out, like you can go for the sprint if you want.
And will we see Sagan back at the front of the sprints, going for the green jersey again?
He always likes to get a top 5, doesn't he? It's like he'll be in the top 5, but he's always missing that final bit to beat the top guys.
Yeah, I'd agree that he'll be there or thereabouts, but he'll be doing what he's been doing from the beginning of the season, which is there or thereabouts every day, and that it wins you a green jersey if there's no one who's actually winning every day. But I think he's going to be very hard for him to beat Sam Bennett, because Sam's going to win stages. And
then we've got the time trial, stage 5 in the opening week. Only 27.2 kilometres. Can we expect anything interesting to happen in the time trial?
That sounds like you've made up your mind already. It does sort of feel as if the Tour de France has got 2 time trials in it this year because they have to, not because they particularly want it. Whether it's because last year's final time trial was so dramatic that they don't want to be accused of trying to repeat that, I don't know, but the time gaps are going to be small. Looking at time trialing so far this year, INEOS's time trial setup and time trial tech is clearly in front of everybody else's. They've been so good. I would be looking at seeing, particularly the first time trial, there'd probably be 3 or 4 INEOS guys in the top 10.
And there's not many GC contenders who can't do a decent flat time trial. It's not like Planche de Belfi where you can blow up going uphill. It's flat, you just got to get around.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Michael, is with POGACAR, how much of his time trialling ability was on that uphill one as opposed to on the flats? Like how much is he going to potentially lose?
He's done some good flat TTs this year. He's very good at Tirreno, which is as flat as they come. I think the thing about Planche de Belfi was that took 2 guys to do, because Primož Roglič had to do badly in order to make POGACAR look that good. I mean, he beat Geraint Thomas, for instance, at Tirreno. So his flat TTing is okay, but I don't think I see him taking an advantage.
Of course, what a lot of the fans are looking forward to at the Tour de France is the mountains, both for fans of the race action and fans of the scenery. We get to the mountains on the first Saturday, straight into the Alps. Only 2 stages in the Alps, really. First one to Le GRAND-BORNAND and a descent into the finish, and the second one a summit finish at Tignes. Are those 2 days going to shake things up?
I think when they get to that point, they'll be looking ahead to, for the first one, they'll be looking ahead to Tignes, the second one, which is much harder. And then also you've got Ventoux coming up in a couple more days' time. So when the GC guys arrive there, depending how it's all shuffled on the overall classification, maybe that day they'll be like, actually no, we'll let some other guys take this. Maybe more of the pure climbers who have lost time in the time trial already.
If I'm honest, I think those first 2 stages in the Alps, and even through into that stage in the Ventoux, it could go either way. I looked at it and thought, I don't see if I were running a team, I don't see what I would be trying to do here. And that's exactly what they're trying to create, is that degree of uncertainty, because the first one into Le GRAND-BORNAND goes up the Colombier, but that's not, it's picturesque, but it's not a really vicious climb. And then there's quite a long descent into the finish. So I can see that finishing as a decent sized bunch. Following on to Tignes, it's not that hard to climb. So I can see that finishing as a bunch. And then everyone starts to look to the Ventoux, and I don't know what the hell anyone's going to make of the Ventoux stage when they get to it, because it's an odd stage.
Well, let's jump on to stage 11 and the double ascent of Mont Ventoux. It sounds great. It's something that race director Christian Prudhomme has been wanting to do for many years. The first ascent up from Salt, which is a very gradual climb, and then the second ascent up from Bédoin, which is a more famous one through the mountains, through the woods, and a lot steeper, a lot more challenging. But both times you've got the long, very fast ascent down to Malocene. The fact they're going up the same mountain twice, does it actually make any difference to how they'll approach it?
I think the nice thing of having the descent rather than finish on the summit is that you don't just wait all afternoon in front of the telly for the action to kick off. Like, it inevitably will, because either someone will attack at the top and try to hold it, or the descent, everyone's trying to hold the wheel into the finish. So you're almost bound to have some action, which, famous last words, there's ride nicely over the top and then a nice little ride down into the finish, but let's see.
It's also a really long stage. It's 200k long. You've got 200 kilometers and you're going to climb Mont Ventoux twice. It's going to, I mean, looking at even the official timings, you're talking about it taking a pretty solid 6 hours. So that's, I mean, there's not going to be any action at all, I think, until that second climb of the Ventoux. Everything else is just there to make you tired. But what's going to happen at that point? It could be quite interesting. It's going to depend who started to look weak on this long stage, and just who You know, you're climbing and you're riding that front group, you're going to start getting a feeling for who's blowing a bit, who's just a little bit more at the back and trying to, it's, you know, I think the riders are very much going to read that when they get to it.
It would be very strange to see a big group go over the summit the second time. It's very rare you see a big group of riders go to the top of the Ventoux
I think
together.
so, and it also depends on the weather, because hot day, top of Ventoux is like nowhere else on the planet, and it can be phenomenally windy, and it's one of the handful of places in the world where it could be phenomenally windy and phenomenally hot at the same time. And that could have a big influence. We could have the kind of the rarely seen uphill echelon.
And then we have a few stages down to the Pyrenees, the traditional transitional stages. So what should we expect to see on those days?
Yeah, you inevitably see something big go wrong for one of the big GC contenders, as we've seen in the past few years. Whether that's losing time in the wind, like we saw with POGACAR last year, but then he made it up, or you know, a crash in the bunch which takes down, you know, one of the...
Well, usually Geraint Thomas, let's face it.
Yeah, or Primož Roglič, you know, there's a few of these names now where one of them has that big warning on their back where, you know, at some point something will go horribly wrong.
We would expect some big groups to get away to contest stage finishes.
Well, it's been the story of this year, it's been breakaways. My favourite stage of a Grand Tour is normally the stage after the first big GC sort out, when 2/3 of the field go, right, not us after all, and you get a break with like 40 people in it. And it's just mayhem, and I love that. And that might not happen this time, because I'm not sure whether we're going to see a GC sort out. Unless it's on the Ventoux stage, we could still end up with a lot of guys very close together and some really not very GC feeling riders still in the top 10, 12 places. So you might get a lot of teams trying to defend 12th place on the way to the Pyrenees. But I hope we get those breakaways.
I mean, it does look like it's going to be the Pyrenees where we have the real yellow jersey sort out this year, with 3 big stages down there.
If the races pan out, everyone's watching each other in the Alps, the Pyrenees is where, if people have lost time in the first time trial, they will lose time in the second time trial. Guys like Miguel Angel Lopez they'll have to make the race there.
This tour is relatively unusual for a modern tour in that it's doing the Pyrenees second. It used to be they alternated year about, and these days almost invariably they do the Alps first, because if you do the Alps first, then you can go to Paris for the final stage. If you do the Pyrenees, you're miles from Paris. The fact the Pyrenees are happening second, most of the kind of the GC contenders that we're dealing with this year, they haven't really done it that way round, and the Pyrenees are tougher in that they're steeper, they're rougher, they're less predictable, attacks work better, and if we haven't had fireworks before the Pyrenees, we sure as hell will get fireworks when we get there.
Tadej Pogacar. The defending champion hasn't put a foot wrong this season, winning the UAE Tour at the beginning of the year and a particularly tough edition of Tirreno Adriatico in spring. He then went on to win the one-day classic Liège-Bastogne-Liège. His preparation race for the Tour de France was his home Tour Slovenia. Primož Roglič, the man we all expected to win last year before a penultimate day capitulation, has been on top of his game all season, winning the Tour of the Basque Country and only denied a dominant win in Paris-Nice with a crash on the final stage. Geraint Thomas, the 2018 Tour de France winner, is back to race-winning form. He took victory at the Tour of Romandie in May and helped teammate Richie Porte to win the Criterium de Dauphiné in June, while taking 3rd place himself. Here are some other GC contenders. Miguel Angel Lopez. Movistar's new signing has been consistent this season without being outstanding. He'll likely have shared leadership of the team with Enric Mas, who was 5th at both the Tour and Vuelta last year. Bora Hansgrohe's Emmanuel Buchmann will be hoping to repeat his form from 2019 when he finished 4th. Vincenzo Nibali may still have a Grand Tour challenge in his legs, while Guillaume Martin and David Gaudu will have French hopes resting on their shoulders. Other riders to watch include world champion Julian Alaphilippe. He's recorded only 2 wins this year, but seemed to be coming nicely to the boil at the Tour de Suisse just a few weeks before the Tour de France. Wout van Aert was perhaps the rider of the Tour last year, taking bunch sprints and working as a mountain domestique for Jumbo-Visma. The Belgian had a great start to the 2021 season, but recently having his appendix out may have just curtailed his Tour de France preparations. Then we have the most hotly anticipated Grand Tour debut in recent history. Alpecin Phoenix's Mathieu van der Poel lines up for his first Tour, and we wait with bated breath to see what he'll do before heading off to prepare for the mountain bike race at the Olympic Games in Tokyo. So, Johnny, Michael, I don't think there's any doubt that it's the 2 Slovenians, Roglič and Pogacar, that start as the 2 main favourites for this year's race.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I mean, Roglič hasn't raced, I think, since Liège, so he's a slightly unknown quantity, but there's no reason to think he's not going to be in good shape. And POGACAR has been really very, very strong this year. So yeah, first and second last year, it's theirs to squabble over at least to start with.
And how does a team like INEOS, or anyone else for that matter, go about beating them? Because just setting a fast pace up the last climb and then sprinting out the last kilometre and a half, that's just not going to beat them, is it?
Well, Jumbo couldn't do that last year with Roglic, who was trying to win the Tour on bonus seconds alone. But I guess with INEOS, the difference when you look at their team this year, it's not just a whole squad of domestiques. They've got multiple people who could win the Tour or who have already won Grand Tours. So I guess if you get to the last week, you can send Richard Carapaz up the road, and then it's up for POGACAR or Roglic to chase them down, knowing that you've got Geraint Thomas sitting there ready to go as well. It will just be about keeping all those time gaps close at the top, I guess.
Is that how INEOS do it? They've got Carapaz, Thomas, Port potentially, maybe even Geoghegan Hart.
So when you list it like that, that's kind of three guys who have won a Grand Tour and someone who, by all reason, should have. They've got so many weapons they can deploy. You know, they can use two Grand Tour winners as a decoy. They know that they're almost certainly going to gain a bit of time in the time trials because their time trial setup is so well dialed and their time trial program is so good. But it's going to depend how the two Slovenians look, because it's kind of up to them really to make the race. Whatever the race does, they're going to define it.
How mouth-watering a prospect is it this year to see INEOS Grenadiers at full strength go up against Primož Roglic and Tadej Pogacar?
It's a hell of a team INEOS have actually got, isn't it? It's extraordinary. It's the strongest team I can remember them taking for a few years. And coming in as not having won it last year, which is almost, it feels like the default is that INEOS turn up as defending champions, and this time they're not. Really strong team. And it's kind of it feels like a shake-up the race this year, doesn't it? It's a slightly different feeling course. We've got Primož Roglic and Tadej Pogacar from last year, who we didn't really expect them to be slugging it out for the win. Pogacar's back as defending champion. It feels really open, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And INEOS, they've not just won, I think, almost every stage race they've done, apart from the UAE Tour. They've dominated, taking the whole of the podium, or first and third.
Yeah, they've been making it look easy. At the point where Richie Porte was winning Dauphiné, it wasn't a gift, but it was perfectly clear that, yeah, this guy wins, that guy wins, whatever, we don't care, we've got so many guys who can win. And then they bring them all to the Tour, so I mean, they could flatten it, they could crush the life out of the thing from stage one, so let's at least hope they don't do that. I don't think they're going to get the opportunity to do that, but you know.
I've often found myself comparing like Bernal and Pogacar, and where Bernal at the end of the Giro said that he really struggled after winning the Tour. You kind of get the opposite with Pogacar. He's learned how to ride the Tour because he hasn't been part of a winning team before, so he hasn't seen that. And then this year, you half expect him, maybe wrongly, to go and do it all again and better.
So last year, he was a bit out of form early in the season, then he crashed out of the Giro. But Geraint Thomas is once again a GC contender?
He wasn't really a contender last year, but he did a few good rides last year. He wasn't completely devoid of form. Certainly this year, he's been in good form. I would have said the only chink in his armour I've seen so far was at the time trial in the Dauphiné.
And he looked good on the climbs. He took that very sneaky win in the Dauphiné, which suggests his racing instinct is there, fully dialed in, so he looks good.
I think we forget as well, at the Giro last year, until he slipped on a bidon in like the start of one of the early stages, he was looking good, and I mean, INEOS went and won the race anyway. So it's not like he wasn't ready for the Tour last year, but it wasn't completely gone. He wasn't, riding off the back like Froome is now. Yeah, I guess it'll be the question of whether they can match the Slovenians. We've seen so many riders come out, like Nibali, come out and say they're just on a different level and there's nothing we can do to ride the same as them. So that's the one question will be, is he on the same level as them?
So outside of those top three riders, we have the likes of Miguel Angel Lopez, Enric Mas, Buchmann, Vincenzo Nibali, Rigoberto Urán, Fuglsang. Can any of them mount a serious challenge for the win, or are they just there to make out the top 10?
If I'm honest, I think most of them are there to fill up the top 10. It's a Grand Tour, strange things happen. Somebody gets in a break, somebody else crashes, somebody loses 3 teammates, so you can't predict anything with certainty, but at this end of the telescope, they look like the guys who were finishing, 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th.
Outside of the GC contenders, we have probably 3 of the most exciting riders that we've seen in the peloton for a long time. Julian Alaphilippe, Wout van Aert, and making his Grand Tour debut, Mathieu van der Poel. What we're looking forward to from riders like that?
I mean, those 3 basically lit up the entire spring schedule. I mean, every race was those 3 battling it out for all the top races. So, I mean, Van der Poel's not going to leave France without a stage win, no matter how he has to do it. Somehow he's gonna. It'll be on the day when he says, "I'm not interested in today," and that's when he'll go up the road and win by 2 minutes. But for the others, Alaphilippe, as we said earlier, surely he's got to win one of the first 2 opening stages. But it's going to, if they're all competing against each other, say if Alaphilippe just is not in the GC race still in the first 10 days, then we'll see him going up against the other 2, which will be nice to revisit the battles of spring.
It'd be nice to see Wout van Aert back up there. A phenomenal spring, but only 14 days of racing, but only 2 of those he didn't finish in the top 10.
Yeah.
And then he was 11th and 13th. So, and that's in stage races, spring classics. I mean, he has recently had his appendix out, so that would have hampered his performance. But
Curious to see how he comes back from that, because it's a proper piece of surgery. It takes some recovering from. If he is over that and ready for some bike racing, he could be leading the race by 30 or 40 seconds at the end of the first week, because he's got the uphill finishes, he's got a time trial, he can do all of that. He's got the sprints where he's not going to lose anything, might pick up some time bonuses. I mean, he could be in yellow, and firmly enough in yellow to give Jumbo-Visma an interesting problem. And isn't it bizarre that it's Mathieu van der Poel's first Grand Tour?
He'll be competing in the sprints. Like if he'll definitely have lost enough time in GC, so the later breakaway stages. He'll just be everywhere, I think, and it'll be the race where you see him elevate up another level in terms of like cycling's consciousness.
And he's got the advantage that he's not got, other than winning a stage, he doesn't have any long-term ambition. So there's almost no loss to any of it. There's no risk. He's not gambling with anything.
We know he's going home probably on the first rest day to get back on the mountain bike to prepare for Tokyo.
Yeah.
Well, I can't let you guys go without making a prediction. I shall go first, and I'll say Roglic to win, breaking his French stage racing curse, finally winning the Tour.
I'd like Johnny to go second.
I'm going to go for Richard Carapaz after something untoward happens.
Oh God, I deserve
Thomas.
that. I was going to say Carapaz. I thought that was going to be the big reveal at the end. I was going to say Richard Carapaz, and everyone was going to be so amazed. Well, if you're taking that, do you know what? I would love to see Richie Porte win the Tour de France. So I'm going to say Richie Porte, more for sentiment than for cold hard logic.
I think a lot of people would quite like to see
Yeah.
that.
He's one of those, it's like one of those people who should have won it, deserves to win it. This year, gonna be his year.
Well, thank you very much for watching, and thank you again to our sponsor Zwift for supporting all of our Tour de France content this year. Enjoy the tour.